All right, let's go. So currently it's what time by you, Celeste?
It's 6:09 a.m. on a Saturday
Got
morning.
Guys, it is 6 a.m. in Australian time. I'm talking with my friend Celeste, whom I met in Copenhagen, and she woke up hella early just to record this podcast with me. So let's just give a hand for Celeste. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your mornings with me. Truly, I appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Excited
Yes,
to talk about
and
travel.
yes, I mean, so you've been to how many countries at this point? You're definitely more traveled than I am at this point.
I've, yeah, I've been to about 42 countries if you were to include Australia, where I live, because it's such a big place and there's many, many states to explore. But also if you were to include like those teeny tiny places like Liechtenstein in Switzerland or something like that. But yeah, I've been to a few places, which is pretty damn lucky.
That is crazy. So, how many of these have you done solo trips? I know for a while you traveled with your ex-boyfriend. I remember you saying.
Yes, I've always traveled with either a partner or a friend because to travel from Australia, it's so far away, and to do like a solo trip, it always seemed like not worth it. Like it was just better to go with a friend. But when I met you in December of 2022, that was actually my first solo trip. So a good 10 years after my first like travel experience, pretty much, I had my first solo trip. So yeah, it was very different, but it was absolutely amazing. I think you definitely have different travel experiences when you're traveling alone compared to when you're traveling with someone. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. I feel like when you travel with other people, the experience is more about your relationship with them rather than the environment. So
Yeah,
definitely they're both amazing experiences, but just a different way to travel for sure.
it really, really is. That is exactly how I felt when I reflected on my recent solo trip. I was like, wow, I really was able to do whatever I wanted and do, like, I was in control of everything. But yeah, when you're traveling with someone, it is all about that relationship, and there's a lot of negotiating. It's like a really intense relationship that happens when you travel together. But it's awesome. It's a great experience.
That is definitely something I have not really experienced for myself. So
Ah,
I need more experiences in that field, traveling with someone else. But yeah, no, when you're solo, it's so liberating, I feel like, because you don't have to negotiate. Everything is on your own terms.
it is. It is. You get to choose how much time you get to socialize and how much time you get to spend by yourself. You get to decide, one day I'm just going to read a book the whole day in a cafe, and another day you're going to go spend the day with some randoms that you met in the hotel common room. It's really good.
Yes. And can we talk about meeting new people? I feel like when we stayed in the hostel, it was a very social hostel to begin with, but we stayed in an all-female dorm, which was amazing.
That was actually from that trip. I would say that that hostel and that room that we shared together was probably the best one of the entire trip. We had 8 of us in the room, and probably six out of the 8 of us just all happened to like get along so well. We had that night out together doing the pub crawl thing, and it was like magical, Lydia, because like we all got along despite our age or where we came from or the reason why we were traveling, and it was so fun. It was so fun, and I'll never forget it. It was a great time.
It was so much fun. I think that was one of my best experiences staying in like that kind of female dorm because normally when I travel, I stay in mixed dorms because it's just cheaper normally, which is
Mm, yeah.
it's a problem. Hostel world needs to fix that.
It's true.
But yeah, so I decided to do the female dorm for whatever reason, but it was definitely the right choice because literally we were just we just were like, hey, do you want to like go out tonight? And then suddenly we were all just getting ready to go to a club to party together. We got ready together, left together, and then got home back to the hostel together. It was a great time.
It was. And it was like we almost knew each other beforehand because I don't know, we just all got along really well. It was really beautiful.
Yes.
But I totally agree. I usually have gone to mixed dorms as well because it's cheaper. But I just thought, because it was my Copenhagen was my first stop on my first solo travel trip. So I was like, oh, safety reasons, I'll go into an all-girl dorm. And it was, yeah, it was the best thing I did to start off the trip. Very grateful to have met all of you there that night.
Yes, I feel so fortunate to have met you on your first solo trip. Um, I feel like that's super special. But do you think that your perceptions of traveling now has changed now that you've been solo as far as like what you believed before? Did you have any fears and like how were those fears confronted when you actually did these solo experiences?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, with the fears, it mainly came from flying, actually. I think the older I've gotten, the more fearful and irrational my thoughts have been on traveling and flying on a plane, thinking that it's going to go down in flames and then that's it. I'm never even
Oh
going to
my
make it to my
gosh.
destination. I know it's really bad. So that was the first thing that I had to confront because when I travel with someone, I can console with them and then they can, help me through it. Whereas this time I was completely by myself. Um, so that was the first challenge. But, naturally, as a solo traveler, you make friends with the person next to you on the plane and then they end up, once you get to know them, then you're like a little bit more comfortable and you're like, oh, okay, my irrational thoughts, they're irrational. I'm going to be just fine. Um, but the other thing with solo travel was just safety because traveling as a, a single woman, like you just don't know. I was quite lucky that most of the trip was around the Scandinavian region, and I know that it's quite safe there. Um, but I did go to Turkey at the end of my trip, um, or Turkey. Now that's their name now, and I had some friends who were well travelled pre-warn me before I left, saying, just be extra cautious. It's just a different culture out there. And I knew that if I was traveling with a boyfriend, for example, I wouldn't have that fear. So I definitely had to overcome a bit of anxiety about what my friends had told me, but it ended up being so fine. You just have to be street smart as a traveler, a little bit more alert as a woman alone, but it was totally fine. So that was really great. And now it's totally set me up to do so much more solo travel and also meeting other solo female travelers like yourself. It's just inspiring stuff like meeting you and you telling me about your travel stories. It, pumped me up to be like, yeah, I can do this. I can go wherever I want and I will be totally fine and happy and safe.
Yes, I love to hear that. I would agree that my concern or my fears as a solo female traveler is related to safety because the world that we live in is just an unfortunate reality that there are more barriers for women in anything we do really, but specifically when we travel that men never have to think about. For example, I try to never walk alone at night. I can bet that most men do not have that same concern or rule for themselves. So just extra hurdles that we have to go through as women it's definitely a struggle in like the travel industry, the travel world that maybe one day will change, but it should never stop you. And I'm so glad that it didn't stop you, Celeste, and that you've had these amazing experiences in spite of your fears. Have you learned
Yeah,
anything about yourself, like because you spent so much time alone now versus always traveling with someone? Like now you're able to focus more on yourself and your own thoughts. So, is there any like takeaways that you've learned when traveling about yourself?
that's another really good question. I would say, and maybe it's also come about because I'm getting older, but when I say older, I mean like I'm getting into my later 20s, but um, I'm a lot more confident and um, not afraid to just talk to someone who I don't know. Like I am, nothing will hold me back to just be like, hello, what's your name? Like, where do you come from? What are you doing? Kind of
That's
thing. Like,
literally what that's literally what you said to me when we first met.
yeah, I love it because like traveling is the best and most efficient way to learn about the world that we live in. It exposes you to new cultures and you learn about new histories, which sometimes is depressing because there's a lot of war actually. But not just the country and culture that you're, currently visiting, but the people. Like after meeting you and the other girls in the dorm, you just learn so much about other people, and it also like restores your faith in humanity. So I love that I've just grown to be more confident so that I can just randomly talk to other travelers and just get to know them. And it's like, cool, I'll probably forget your name, but I'll still somehow remember your like travel stories.
Yeah.
And I just love that. So yeah, probably the confidence part.
Mm. I'm
What about you?
oh, for me, I think I think I've learned to just trust myself and my intuition a lot more
Mm, yeah.
because when I spent the 5.5 weeks in Europe by myself, that was, I mean, the longest time I've spent with myself in my whole life because I live with my
Mhm.
family currently.
Mm,
And I've never really went abroad before that. And so that was a really big learning experience in just
yeah.
knowing that at the end of the day, my voice should override anyone else's, and that some people might have valuable input, but it's not for me to prioritize above my own. And so I think that's what I've learned is that at the end of the day, I have to turn to my own heart and my own soul and just listen to what it's telling me and kind of override all the other noise.
I love that. That is so true. Wow. That's really powerful. What a great reflection. I love that.
But I mean, same for you. Do you think in these travel experiences, have you really changed as a person, would you say? Like how has travel transformed um who you were before you started traveling versus after?
Oh, look, I think I've always been a very bubbly, kind of open to new experiences and learning new things kind of person. But I don't know, I feel like travel has just, it kind of has made me the person that I am in terms of like how I interact with people, how I listen to people, because I feel like when you travel, you have to actively listen to what people are saying and the stories that they're sharing. So I think I really learned how to listen properly. Um, and the sense of understanding and empathy with others, because when you travel, you meet people who have come from completely different lives, and sometimes they're not as fortunate as yours. Others are more fortunate. They've lived more fortunate lives than you, but like I don't know, you just sort of learn to just empathize with them and have a really strong sense of understanding of where they've come from. And I don't really know how to describe it, but maybe it's just improved my traits and skills. I don't really know. That's actually kind of hard to answer. Sorry.
No, yeah, it's it is hard to answer because you don't see the changes in yourself, I think, as much as maybe other people, or just because you're with yourself every single minute of the day, you don't see these micro changes that are happening. But I think
Yeah.
if we were to look back a year, 5 years ago today, that we're actually completely different people. At least that's how I feel about myself. I feel like I'm a completely different person. Even when I look back during the pandemic, I'm like, wow, that girl's she has no idea
Yeah.
what she's gonna experience and how she's gonna be like now.
Yeah. I think that's very true. So did you travel um once the pandemic had started kind of thing, or did you travel before the pandemic as well?
I literally during the pandemic and before, I've really never traveled.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was after the pandemic, kind of like around. Well, wait, when was it? I'm getting. I completely have lost track of time
It was
because
in 2020 when it really hit.
yeah, so definitely yeah afterwards after the restrictions have like eased down and stuff like that.
Yeah. I feel like even for our trip, the pandemic didn't really seem like it existed over there, which was great. Very convenient for me.
Yeah, so I would love to hear about your experiences in Australia because I have never talked to someone on this podcast for one about living in Australia, and I you don't really meet many Australians in the United States because I mean, I guess why would you come here if you're from Australia? But yeah, I would love to hear your experience in a different continent.
Sure, yeah. I feel like now a lot of Australians are traveling to the Americas, and I think it's like the new hot destination. But there's just way too many Aussies that go to Europe and Southeast Asia all the time. It's probably why you met
Mm,
me, and you probably met a heap of other Australians on your trip when you
I
were in
met
Europe.
so many.
Yeah, we're everywhere. We love it because it's like um,
And I love
even
Australians. Y'all are so friendly.
we're just like I don't know if it's a cultural thing now, but it's like as soon as you finish high school, everyone's like, all right, we've got to do a backpacking trip to either Europe or Southeast Asia for at least 3 months, and then it's like a coming of age thing that happens. Like it's very common, and then we just get all excited, and then we become travelers. It's the
That's
way of living in
amazing. I
Australia.
respect that
Yeah,
so much, and I feel like the US has a lot to take note from that.
it's definitely a privilege though. Like I completely acknowledge that not every Australian has had that opportunity.
Mm.
Um, but I think we're pretty grateful people over here, and so we recognise, if we can travel, we're pretty damn lucky. I would say being a teacher in Australia is like the best thing because I love my job. I love the school where I teach at, but we also have really good working conditions and pay for the job. So our school terms are really different to yours, and our biggest school holidays is during our summertime, which unfortunately means it's wintertime everywhere else that I want to travel to. But essentially, throughout the year, I get um, 3 school holidays that go for 2 weeks each, and then the big summer holiday break that goes for 6 weeks at the end of the year, so our Christmas time. Um, and so, though I didn't really do it at the start of my career because there's just so much work to do, you usually work through your holidays. Um, it's like amazing. Like you can just book to go away for 4 weeks, whether that's, in the Americas or Europe or something like that. And sure, the flights are a little bit more expensive because everyone has time off during that time. But it's just, I can travel for the entire school holiday period, and I'm also still getting paid um, because that's part of my working conditions. So sometimes if I'm traveling to a cheap place, um, my pay could pretty much like pay for the holiday, if that makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
an amazing, amazing opportunity and it's like privilege to have. So one, I love my job, and two, I don't plan on leaving it anytime soon because I get to travel while also having the best job in the world. So yeah,
I
best
was
job.
wondering, what are your
Yeah.
future travel plans? What's on the horizons for you?
Well, so taking full advantage of the school holidays that I get as part of my job, I'm going to travel to, well, actually, the first term holidays, I'm going to go on a cruise. That's within Australia. It's on the bucket list. I've always wanted to go on a cruise. I think they're insane. So I'm just going to be going to Queensland and seeing the Great Barrier Reef from
Ooh.
yeah, doing a couple of day trips up there, which is great. And then I will be going to Singapore in August, and then I've got a trip booked in September to go to Morocco. And then
Oh, that's
hopefully,
awesome.
yeah, and then hopefully, maybe if I have enough money, I'm going to go to the USA. Um, I haven't done any plans for it, but hopefully I can spend,
Chicago, eh?
yeah,
Just kidding.
exactly, and spend 4 weeks there. So that's my plan this year.
Wow, 4 weeks
Um,
in the US.
yeah, if I can and if I can afford it, because I also don't know. Our flights are really expensive. Like, I don't know if you remember me saying, but I paid $3,500 Australian dollars just to get return airfare tickets to Europe.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, so I don't know what it's going to be like to fly to America. If I was to fly to Morocco in June, it would have costed me 5,000 Australian dollars just return tickets.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully the
Dang. But
flights are
but
cheap.
in exchange you get cheap Asian flights, right? Like Indonesia, Thailand. Are those fairly
Yeah,
cheap flights?
we do. There's usually a deal every now and then. Very cheap. Even Japan. Japan is pretty cheap to fly to, which is great.
Where has been your favorite place that you've traveled so far?
Or that's a hard question to answer. But I would say like overall, Japan will be my favorite country ever to go to.
Mm,
It's just so weirdly unique in every way, and the food is out of this world. The people are so humble. Like the culture is alive and well, despite it being also so modern. Like it's just such a cool place and great fashion. So much great fashion over there. So yeah,
I
I would
can
say Japan.
imagine.
Yeah. What about you?
My favorite place, I've said it before and I will say it again.
Yeah.
Hawaii is just such a special place. And I don't know, I've never been to Australia, so maybe you'll say, oh, the beaches there, like, can't compare. But from my experience, it's just, it's what connected to my soul the most.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I remember you telling me when I met you.
I was like, Hawaii. I literally say it to everyone.
It's beautiful. It's a special connection that you'll have with that country now for the rest of your life.
Yeah, yes, for sure. Even though technically it's like part of the state, so when people say like where's your favorite place, I know they expect me to say a country, not a US state, but I mean, technically Hawaii should be its own country because we illegally overtook the countries or took overtook the government. So, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I actually didn't know that it wasn't considered its own country. I thought it was.
Yeah, it's one of I think it was the last state or maybe that Alaska was the last, but it was one of the last states that became part of the U.S. And Hawaiians had no say in it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. the awful
But
history of colonization.
yeah, and Australia has a history with like British colonization, right? Because Australia used to be a British territory.
Yeah, there is. I could that could be a whole nother podcast episode. I love like informing other people from around the world about it because it's like it's not really well known worldwide, but it is a really complex and traumatic thing. We have basically our own genocide over here from our really awful history. We have a very dark history here in Australia that's not well known. Um, but
Is it well
it's
known amongst Australians? Like, is it taught in schools?
it didn't used to be when I was going through my senior years of high school.
Wow, that's
But it's
insane to not
I
know
know.
your own country's past.
Yeah, look, we had a really whitewashed curriculum where we didn't really learn about our dark history, but it's becoming more well known as the years go by. But there's still a lot of gaps in knowledge. There's still a lot of racism towards our First Nations people. And when I say First Nations, I'm referring to Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people. And yeah, they still cop racism. There's still a lot of stereotypes towards them. Our government is still really slow on change. Like we don't have a treaty with First Nations people. We're the only country in the world that doesn't have that with
Like
um,
like
the Indigenous
protection
people.
or rights for Native peoples of Australia.
A whole range of things like land rights, protections, um, even their own ability to like govern themselves or look after their own children. It's a very complex thing, but slowly we're becoming more aware of the intergenerational trauma that they've experienced and our stolen generation. And as I said before, that there was even a genocide and the really awful, just inhumane practices that our previous governments had and enforced on them. Like, it's just really awful. And when we have the time, I'll have a whole podcast on it because, like, very big on spreading awareness. Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to hear more thoughts about that because it really is so sad that the most important parts of history, like the ones that the events that shape our history and societies, swept under the rug because what's more important is how we were saviors of the earth and like the glorification of Western colon. I'm losing my words. Colonizers.
Colonizers.
Col-
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but
Exactly right.
but I
Yeah,
want
you were on.
I
Oh, sorry, go on.
oh I know that you're short on time, so I just wanted to wrap it up with one last question. Um,
Yeah.
I forgot. Happy Women's History Month for one. Let me
Yeah.
say that.
Thanks. Yeah. Happy
And
International Women's Day.
yes, to follow up, what are you most proud of yourself for, Celeste?
Oh, I would say as of recently, just being more assertive and saying how I feel, like like saying what I need to say in a respectful way, but in an assertive way, so that I'm taken more seriously, I'm respected, and I'm listened to. Because as women, sometimes we don't get that respect automatically. But I've definitely found my voice, and yeah, I've overcome that whole, I'll just sit back and be silent on, different things. And now I'm like, nah, I'm just going to say it. So yeah, probably that.
Yes. Oh, I love that for you. Thank you so much for sharing, Celeste.
Thank you so much for asking me such great questions. You're an awesome host.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to have you back whenever. Maybe we can meet up someday. I'm trying to go to Morocco. I don't know about September, but I mean, hopefully one of these days we'll run into each other in some country.
I hope so. Maybe even America at the end of the year. Who knows?
Yes. Yes. I love to have you come and visit, but yeah, get some sleep. Go back to
Thank
sleep
you.
now.
You have a great day, seeing as it's like 2 p.m. in your time. I
Yeah.
love it.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye, Celeste.
See you, Lydia. Bye.